And this is super current as of today, because conversational experiences, the UIs that in conversational experiences, the UIs the agents have to create are more dynamic than ever and more composable than ever, because they need to, like in real time, decide what to show you, right? And the good news is that Lightning Web Components are supported in Agentforce experiences. They can be used as agent responses. So that's great. It's important to know. And this is the anatomy of a Lightning Web Component. So I mentioned that they are based on web standards. So basically you are going to be rating the HTML, which is going to be like it's going to contain the HTML elements that shape your component. Then you have your JavaScript file in which you're going to define the behavior of your component, how it responds to user interactions. And then you may have a CSS file. Typically you will have one with styling your component look and feel. There is one file that is specific to Salesforce, which is the metadata file, which is where you configure your component and how it's attached to Salesforce. For instance, this is a component that can be used on an app page, on the utility bar, on a Salesforce page, but also in Agentforce, in an agent. And those are the typical things that you configure in a component. So when I prepared this presentation we have given it for many years here at TDX since LWC was released in 2019. And it's always been kind of the same. But when I started to work on this year's talk, I said, okay, we need to approach it from a different way because we are in a totally different landscape right now, right? Because if you start to learn Lightning Web Components now, probably you are not going to start taking a look at like the syntax and the variables and how you create the methods and so on. You are going to use AI, right? So because of that, I wanted to show you how a developer would create a component as of today. And for that, we are going to imagine that we are in a company in which we are managing a conference, say TDX, in which there are talks, and the company has asked us to create a component to rate TDX talks, okay? And we're going to use AI to create this component, and then we will go through the code. So I have the component definition in here. I have explained like all the details of what I want how I want the component to be. Normally, you don't need to give so many details, but I want it to be fast, so that's why I was so detailed in the specification. And, sorry. So here we are going to say, use the specification that you have in this file. And I'm going to leave this here working. Meanwhile, I continue with the presentation, and we will come back later because I wanted to make this live, okay? So, how I think you should approach Lightning Web Components as of today is more taking a look at the big picture and understanding which modules and services are available that you can use in your components to use the full power of the platform, okay? And all those modules are part of what we have called the Lightning Web Stack, okay? We are going to take a look at one of each at each of one, I'm stumbled. Each of these layers, one by one, okay? So first one, we already took a look at it, the framework, Lightning Web Component Framework. Next one would be the Lightning Design System and Base Components layer, okay? So the Lightning Design System, or SLDS, Salesforce Lightning Design System, is a CSS framework that Salesforce created to help you create components that have the same look and feel as Lightning experience. So what does it include? A series of classes, icons, illustrations, etc. that you can use in your components directly. So that they resemble what you normally have in Lightning experience. They also give you additional design principles and best practices that you have on our webpage that you should be following if you plan to extend Salesforce. And it's been designed for accessibility. It's like the North Star of the design system. Know that there are 2 versions of it. The last one was released last year, SLDS V2, and it has some improvements in regards to flexibility and also some more tools for developers and for designers, just in case you see it around. And then that's like the design system, just presentation, CSS. But if you want to, instead of building everything from scratch, reusing pre-built building blocks that are ready for you, what you need to use are our Lightning-based components, which are basically buttons, tabs, like all the individual components that a web page usually has, already pre-built for you. This has been built on the Lightning design system, so they follow its guidelines and its styles, and also they are configurable with something that we call the styling hooks, and that it's also something standard in web development. I've added this here as a bonus. These are not Lightning-based components, but modules that are available, APIs that are available for you to work on the platform and make the most of the platform. You have modules to interact with Flow. You have modules to interact with the utility bar, with the workspace in console apps, and to navigate between components. So before creating from scratch, go and take a look at all the base components and utility modules and APIs, because there are many, many things available. So then we have our client-side security architecture layer, which is Lightning Web Security. It runs by default in your apps and in your components on the platform. And it's not something that you are going to play with much, just when debugging, probably, but it's important to know that it is there, okay? Because, so in a page in which you have components from different providers, you want your components to be extremely secure, so that other components from other providers cannot steal your data. So that's what we get with the Lightning Web Security framework architecture. And also, something else that we do with Lightning Web Security, apart from preventing those cross-site scripting vulnerabilities, is to obfuscate some browser APIs that are considered insecure. So it's a security layer, okay? And then the Lightning Data Service, this part, very, very important, is our data retrieval service that is going to help you bind your components, the presentation, with the data that you have in Salesforce. It's going to help you retrieve data, and it's going to help you do it in a very, very optimized way, because it has caching and synchronization capabilities, so that if you have multiple components on the same page working with the same data, they do it in a smart and synchronized way. So when the Lightning Data Service was created, data access was done through the user interface API mostly, but lately more APIs have released wire adapters that you can use to bring data using this caching service. And one of those wire adapters, very popular, is the GraphQL wire adapter. So at the moment, it is possible to access your data through GraphQL, and using that service for caching and synchronization. And this is something that you will be using in your components a lot, because, of course, the ultimate purpose of components is allowing people to work with the data that you have on the platform, right? And finally, there is a layer called Lightning Web Runtime, which is the rendering engine. You are not going to have to deal with this if you are just running components on the platform, but know that you can run components outside of the platform, for instance, on standalone web pages, or this also runs in Experience Cloud pages using this Lightning Web Runtime, which has like different optimized rendering strategies. And the last thing that I wanted to mention before going back to our demo is tests are as important or even more important than code. So in Lightning Web Components, of course, we encourage you to write tests. And the way in which we normally write them is by using the Jest framework. You could use any JavaScript framework, but we have an extension for the Jest framework, which is called SFDC LWC Jest, that gives you already some of the mocks and stubs that you are going to need for testing. This is because LWC tests or JavaScript tests normally run locally in your browser. You have to mock or simulate the data that those tests use. They are not going to use the data that you have in your OR. And with the SFDX LWC Jest extension, that is easy to do, easy to implement. Okay, so let's get back to the demo and see if this works. Worked. Okay, it created something. Let me refresh the page and see. Okay. The demo gods were not super angry today. That's great, because the component was created successfully. And this is what Vibes decided to create. By the way, I used Vibes, but you can use any coding agent of your choice. And ideally, I should be able to here submit a rating, okay, for this talk, and keep it log, have it logged in there. So how did we do this? So first of all, something important that we are using here, that we announced today at the keynote, we are using MCP servers and skills, okay? These are tools that, again, you can use in any coding agent, but that are going to help the coding agent make its work better, because it's telling it how to properly generate components for the Salesforce platform, specifically these skills and these MCP tools. Okay, so I strongly recommend you to take a look at that if you are doing some Vibe coding. Then the component that has been generated is this one. So let's take a look at it. This is the HTML file, and we can start seeing here some of the services or layers that I explained before. Here we are using a Lightning card-based component, okay, which is basically this box, typical box that you will find in Salesforce applications. We are seeing more components. For instance, we have the icons for the star, okay, so everywhere that you see Lightning whatever, we are using a Lightning-based component. Then we are also seeing, let me see, some SLDS classes. So when Lightning-based components are not enough and you need to create your own HTML, instead of creating your own CSS, it's recommended that you use these classes, because the classes use the Lightning design system. And your components are going to look really nice if you use the SLDS classes. And then what about data access, right? Because in the component, we were, let me rate again, we are showing some information from the talk, such as the title of the talk and the presenter, okay? And that is information that we need to retrieve from the backend. So let me open the JavaScript file, which defines the behavior of the component, and see how we are using it. So here, Vibes decided to use a wire adapter called getRecord and call it using the Lightning Data Service. This @wire means I want to retrieve data using that caching and synchronization service that I mentioned before. And this concrete function that we are using here, it belongs to the UI record API. So it decided to retrieve this data using the UI record API. And what happens here, that we have two components on the page, which are like using data from the talk record, but because we are using the Lightning Data Service, no duplicates requests are happening, okay? Only one request is happening. And this is just a read-only component, but if it was a component in which I was editing the talk, I would see the changes immediately reflected here. So that's the power of the Lightning Data Service, and it's like something really nice to see. And then we will have some getters, which are just to show that the information that we can compute in JavaScript and that we can retrieve from the backend in your component. And then we have some handlers. So for the developers here, you are probably familiar with handlers from like regular web programming. This is not different. This is just JavaScript, basic JavaScript, and we are following web component standards with some extra functionality that we are giving to you. This is the meta file where we define the different pages that the component is designed for. And that's it. I told the Vibes to deploy the component through the component specification in my org, and it already did it. Let's take a look at the tests that it created, okay? Because it's very important, Lightning component tests. So these tests are created with Jest. Again, these are JavaScript tests. And we have some tooling available that you can install in Visual Studio Code, or that you can use like in Agentforce Builder, Code Builder, and other experiences. Well, those two really, that are going to help you like running tests. And we also have preview functionality. So for instance, if I want to preview this component and get hot module reloading capabilities, let me open a different terminal. I can run SF Lightning app dev, okay? Okay, let me look for the app. There it is. I can run SF Lightning app dev. Now this is running my app like in a local mode. And if I'm not happy, for instance, with the size, let me do this. I'm not happy with the size of the component. Okay, with the size of the stars of the component, and let me also open Visual Studio Code here. Here it is. Okay. Sorry for this. Probably not the best experience right now. Okay, let me hide the terminal. Where is it not hiding? Well, there it is. So let me hide this as well. And the test. Okay, there it is. So let me find for Lightning icon, there it is. So I have the size that it used for the stars was medium. Take a look at the stars. If I change this and set them as small, I can have like whole module reloading capabilities, and all those capabilities are part of the extensions that you can install in Visual Studio Code to to build Lightning Web Components faster. So we saw the modules, APIs, and services that you can use to get the most of the platform. And we have also seen very quickly some of the tooling that you can use to build those components in an effective way. So let me get back to the presentation and share with you the resources. And meanwhile, I just wanted to tell you, this component was super simple, and I just trusted the agent on creating it. But normally, you will need a human in the loop, and that human in the loop is you. So my recommendation is use the coding agents to learn first. Ask questions, ask all the questions possible until you understand really the details, the big picture, and all the different features that you can use in the components. And then once you know that, like, try to create an app yourself, a sample app, because really how you learn better is by experience. You need to really get your hands on and build something yourself to get started. And I'm sure that the experience now, thanks to coding agents, is going to be like much better than 3 years ago. And we are in the right moment to do that. So that was all for today. Thank you so much for coming. And if you have questions, I will be around.